And we're back for a third installment here of the Roaring Twenties. We have now talked about the automobile, the radio, and movies. We've also talked briefly about prohibition. And now we're going to kind of talk about the changing of times. So we're on our sheet right underneath prohibition here under changing times. You'll see there are squares for farmers, city life, fashion, popular products, and fads and slang words. So what we're going to talk about now is kind of culturally how we changed as a country. Again, the very first thing that we talked about when we introduced this time period is, how much Americans are over this whole concept of war and fighting. Remember, before we entered World War One, we were very, very much neutral. We were very much about peace and everything. And then we kind of, as the war went on, we experienced some things as a country where we kind of got bloodied up. We got some fat lips and some black eyes, and didn't really have a choice but to defend ourselves and kind of take on that personality. Once the war ended and we came out victorious, it was kind of a time where everybody decided that, hey, we're going to come back together as a country and we're going to try to figure out how to have fun again. So that's what the Roaring Twenties is really all about. Um, the first thing to understand when we talk about economically and socially where we are, the first group of people who were affected by the end of the war was the farmers. A lot of farmers in the United States were going bankrupt because there was a surplus of crops after the war. If you remember back to propaganda posters that you created or that we studied, a lot of the propaganda posters were encouraging people to begin to farm more, increase the amount of agriculture that they're producing so that we could continue to send food overseas and support in support of the war. Now, once the war ended, uh, farmers had this big surplus of crops, and there was lots more supply than demand. If you remember back when we talked about supply and demand and monopolies and stuff like that, we have a lot more supply than we do demand at this time. So a lot of farmers were going bankrupt. We talked about the development of the automobile, allowing for so much more freedom. One of the things that came out of this was the idea of suburbs. So you have an urban area, which again, we'll get much more into this next year in world geography, but you have an urban area, which is basically the core of the city. That's your New York City. And then you have the suburbs, which is an extension of that big city. It's an area that surrounds the big city. Where there's a lot more neighborhoods, there's country clubs, there are pools, there are stores, and all kinds of different things. Lots more roads, lots more transportation opportunities, and so people began to move out of the city and live in these suburbs. And because of the development of the automobile, they were able to drive into the city. So you no longer had to continue. If you remember back when we talked about. In New York City during industrialization, they started in immigration, they started to run out of housing and they started to build up because there was no more room to build out. So they had to start building up. That's why we started building skyscrapers and 40, 50, 60-story apartments and stuff in New York City, Chicago, Detroit, all of those big cities because there was just no more room. So now to kind of uncrowd the big cities, people were able to move out in this area called the suburbs and kind of allow the big cities to function just as a hub for workplace. In the 1920s, people were more permissive or laid back. It was a time where many partied and had all kinds of fun. We're going to go back really quick because I forgot to tell you to write down. You're going to write this down under the farmer section, and then you're going to write this down under city life. Um, Sorry about that. So if you need to go back and pause, I'll flip back to farmers one more time. So you can go ahead and pause now and write or type. And then cities, you can pause now and write or type. My apologies there. So again, it was more permissive. The country became more laid back again. We weren't so uptight. We weren't so war minded. And there was a lot of partying going on. This is why alcohol flourished. and there were just all kinds of fun. There were all these bars and there were all these places to kind of celebrate everybody's talents, whether it be music, art, movies, photography, all of those things were now able to be celebrated all because of the development of the automobile. The next thing we're going to talk about is flappers, or I'm sorry, fashion. Within fashion, you have this particular style called flappers, who were women who were considered rebels essentially. So what they did was they had a short, sleek hairstyle, and they would wear dresses. Now, this time that was very, very unheard of for women to wear dresses. They would also wear makeup and put it on in public, which was a totally new concept. This was not something that you did out in public. And they enjoyed doing new dances such as the Charleston, and they did all this stuff in jazz clothes. Also, what I want you to add in there along with the definition of what flappers did. Write this: men took their fashion ideas. Um, you can just write men wore suits, hats, and polished shoes. Um, they went from sports or gangster heroes of the day, and they wanted to appear more dapper. If you talk to your parents, I'm sure they can explain to you what that term means too. Um, so that is what you have in fashion. Again, flappers wore short dresses, short hair, and put makeup on in public, and men wore suits, hats, and polished shoes. There were a few popular dances at the time. Those popular dances were the Charleston, the Lindy Hop, and the Jitterbug. You can look them up on YouTube. There's tons and tons of dances. Unfortunately, because we are in quarantine and we're not in the classroom, we last year we had a dance off where the students, if they wanted to participate, they could learn these dances, and we had kind of like a battle with the use of technology. If you want to still do that, if you want to submit some videos, I'll give you some extra credit or something. If you want to create a video of you or your friends doing these dances, and we can do that for extra credit if you want to have a little bit of fun with those dances. Another video here that I'll post a link to. Uh, selling more appliances. Grocery stores, specifically, and when Dixie became more common. Just this whole concept of people going to stores and buying things. These places began capitalizing on the fact that people had money that they wanted to spend, and they didn't want to spend it on necessities. They kind of wanted to buy things that were more commodities. So Sears and J.C. Penney kind of took the lead there. Electricity. Since electricity became more popular in homes, more people started buying appliances like vacuums and washer machines. So those can be the first two items that you write down in your popular product section: washing machines and vacuum cleaners. You also have new products that you can list in here: Welch's grape jelly, the Eskimo pie, which all of these products that we go through right now that were developed and established in the 20s are products that we still use today. The Eskimo pie is just an ice cream bar with chocolate on the outside, ice cream on the inside. You write those two down. Also, Wrigley's chewing gum, Lysol disinfectant, which is a very big hot commodity right now. Um, you write those two down, and Band-Aids and Kleenexes, also very hot commodity right now. So these are all products that were developed and created in the 1920s that we still use today. So a huge, huge impact on our lives today. Just once again, something else that has been established in the 1920s. Uh, Popular fads. So we're moving on to fads and slang words. Used to have dance marathons where couples would get out and they would dance and they would dance and dance and dance and dance, and it would kind of be like the last person standing or last couple standing. That was always a great form of entertainment, and also flagpole sitting. Um, again, some really interesting YouTube videos and things that you can go if you have a interest in some of these things and sparks curiosity. There's a lot on there, and it's especially flagpole sitting, really, really comical. Something that just is really bizarre and out there. but for whatever reason, people loved it. So 1920s, weird time. Here are some slang words. You can pick out a few. You don't have to write all of these, obviously. Um, a few of my favorite, the cat's meow. Uh, I also like to tell it to Sweeney. Um, a wet blanket, you slay me. These are some that kind of maybe bonus balonus, phony baloney now. Kind of, I don't know. I might be showing my age, but I'm sure some of you all's parents will notice some of this. Noodle juice was considered tea. Um, so you can pick a few of these if you want. The bee's knees means the best. Clam, a dollar was referred to as a clam. Also, other slang terms for money was cabbage or kale. Um, so all of these things were slang terms. They've kind of wean themselves out of American culture now. But 80's, 90's, you still hear them quite a bit, especially if you watch old 60's and 70's TV shows and stuff like that. You can hear a lot of this. So, again, you don't have to write all of these. Rats is another big one. Just pick a few that are your favorite, and you will. Include those in your slang words column. So that's all we have for this episode of the Roaring Twenties. Again, we just filled out changing times, farmer, city life, fashion, popular products, and fads and slang words. No discussion board for this one, so you're good to go there. As we move on, the next one will be the Jazz Age. So really, really fun time there. Lots of great musicians that certainly left a gigantic impact and made their mark, left their legacy in the music section of the Roaring Twenties. So, hope you all enjoyed, and we will meet again soon.